At the city's most lavish fundraiser, my husband leaned close, whispering that I was damaging his high society image and he deserved better. I smiled and walked away. 7 days later, a stranger called to say the board preferred me as CEO instead of him. In that moment, I realized he was not just betraying me, but setting me up to be his scapegoat. My name is Madeline Pierce, and for the last 5 hours, I had been reduced to a sequined prop standing in the shadow of a man who believed he was the sun. The charity gala was held in the grand ballroom of a historic hotel in downtown Chicago, a cavernous space dripping with crystal chandeliers and the heavy, cloying scent of lilies and old money. Outside, the wind off Lake Michigan was howling through the streets of River North, stripping the heat from the pavement, but inside, the air was stiflingly warm, thick with the smell of roasted lamb and ambition. I stood beside Grant Whitmore, my husband of 10 years and the CEO of the Whitmore Lennox Group. He looked immaculate. His tuxedo fit him with the precision of a military uniform, tailored to hide the slight softening of his midsection, while accentuating the broadness of his shoulders. To the world, he was the golden boy of Chicago real estate and investment, the visionary who had turned a faltering family business into an empire worth billions. To me, he was a man who had forgotten that the ground beneath his feet was solidified by my concrete, not his charm. A photographer from a prominent society magazine circled us, his lens hunting for the perfect shot of marital bliss and corporate power. Grant tightened his grip on my waist. It was not a hold of affection, it was a claim of ownership, the way a collector holds a rare vase he intends to auction off when the market peaks. "Smile, Madeline," he murmured through his teeth, his expression frozen in a camera-ready grin. "Try to look like you actually belong here." I adjusted the strap of my emerald gown, forcing the corners of my mouth upward. I had learned the art of the corporate smile years ago. It was a precise muscular contraction that reached the eyes just enough to feign warmth, but stopped short of genuine joy. I was good at it. I was good at everything Grant needed me to be: silent, decorative, and invisible in plain sight. We were approached by Arthur Sterling, one of the largest private equity donors in the Midwest. Arthur was a man of 60 with a face weathered by decades of hostile takeovers. He clapped Grant on the shoulder, ignoring me entirely at first. "Grant, magnificent turnout," Arthur boomed, his voice carrying over the string quartet playing softly in the corner. "I was just looking at the quarterly projections for WLG. That new predictive model you rolled out is nothing short of sorcery. How in God's name are you forecasting liquidity shifts 3 quarters out with that kind of accuracy?" This was the moment. This was always the moment. The predictive model Arthur was referring to was a dynamic algorithm I had spent 8 months building. I had coded the logic myself. Sitting at our dining table long after Grant had gone to sleep, mapping out risk variables and stress testing the capital structures against volatile market shifts, I had saved the company from a liquidity crisis 18 months ago using that exact model. I waited for Grant to pivot, to nod in my direction, to say, "Actually, Madeline is the architect behind the numbers." Grant laughed, a rich baritone sound that charmed boardrooms and bedded mistresses alike. "Well, Arthur, you know me. I have an instinct for where the money flows. It just came to me one night that we were looking at the data all wrong. I restructured the inputs, and the rest is history." He took the credit without a stutter. He inhaled my work and exhaled his own genius. Arthur nodded, impressed. "Brilliant, truly brilliant." He finally glanced at me, his eyes skimming over my face as if I were part of the upholstery. "And this must be the lucky lady." "This is my wife," Grant said, his tone shifting from professional pride to patronizing dismissal. "She is very supportive. She keeps the home life peaceful so I can focus on the heavy lifting." Very supportive, not brilliant, not a partner, not the former financial restructuring expert who saved my inheritance. Just supportive. A cheerleader in couture. I did not correct him. I did not interject to explain the complexities of the algorithm or the nights I spent fixing the mess Grant made of the mezzanine financing. I simply smiled my practiced smile and took a sip of champagne that tasted like vinegar. "A pleasure," Arthur, I said softly. As Arthur drifted away to terrorize a waiter, another flashbulb went off. The photographer waved at us. One more, Mr. Whitmore. Look at your lovely wife. Let's see some passion. Grant turned to me. He moved in close, bringing his face inches from mine, to the camera. It looked like an intimate whisper between lovers sharing a secret in a crowded room. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and mints. His eyes, however, were dead. They were flat, gray stones at the bottom of a frozen river. You are stiff, he whispered, his voice low and melodic. You are making me look bad. Madeline, you are damaging my high society image. I held his gaze, my pulse remaining steady. I am just smiling. Grant. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing my ear. The camera shutter clicked rapidly, capturing what the world would see as romance. I deserve better, he hissed. I can do better than you. Someone who knows how to shine. Then, he made the mistake, the fatal error. He pulled back slightly, his hand squeezing my hip hard enough to bruise. Just get through tonight, Elena. Then we are done. Elena. The name hung in the air between us, invisible and radioactive. My name is Madeline. Elena was the name of the 25-year-old daughter of his biggest rival, a girl who had been interning at the firm for 6 months, a girl I had seen looking at him with hungry eyes across the lobby. Grant froze. For a split second, the mask slipped. Panic flickered in his pupils. He realized what he had said. He realized he had just revealed that his cruelty was not spontaneous, but rehearsed. He had a script in his head, a plan to discard me, and he had been practicing his lines with someone else. I did not gasp. I did not slap him. I did not let a single tear mar the flawless foundation on my cheeks. I simply blinked, slow and deliberate. I looked over Grant's shoulder, standing near the bar, holding a martini and watching us with the predatory focus of a hawk, was Sloane Kerr, the vice president of mergers and acquisitions. She was not drinking. She was watching Grant. When our eyes met, she did not look away. She smirked. It was a subtle, triumphant curling of the lip. She knew. I scanned the room. I saw the chief financial officer, Ethan Hale, avoiding my gaze, pretending to be fascinated by a floral arrangement. I saw the subtle shift in body language from 2 key board members who were whispering and glancing in our direction. This was not just an affair. This was an ousting. Grant had not just found a new woman. He had prepared a new narrative. He was going to cut me loose, and the board had likely already been briefed. I was the old model, the legacy software that was no longer compatible with the gleaming new interface Grant wanted to present to the world. A cold clarity washed over me, sharper and more bracing than the winter wind outside. For 10 years, I had been the spine of this marriage and the brain of his business. I had fixed his mistakes, hidden his incompetence, and polished his reputation until it shone. I had made myself small so he could feel big, and this was my reward: public humiliation and a private replacement. My name, I said, my voice barely a whisper, calm and terrifyingly even. Is Madeline? Grant blinked, recovering his composure with arrogant speed. He chuckled, a nervous sound. Slip of the tongue, darling. Too much champagne. Right, I said. I pulled away from him. I did not storm off. I did not cause a scene that would end up on page 6 of the morning papers. I simply disengaged. I turned my back on him, on the photographer, and on the suffocating lie of the ballroom. Where are you going? Grant demanded, his voice low. We have the donor dinner in 20 minutes. I have a headache, I lied, not bothering to look back. You can handle it. You are a genius, after all. I walked out of the ballroom, down the grand marble staircase, and out into the biting Chicago night. The valet brought my car, and I drove myself home, the silence of the vehicle a sanctuary after the noise of the gala. I drove to our penthouse in the West Loop. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and steel and sharp angles, overlooking the highway and the city skyline. It was beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. It was a house Grant had bought to show off, not a home we had built to live in. I kicked off my heels at the door, leaving them where they fell. I did not turn on the main lights. The glow from the city outside provided enough illumination. I walked straight to my private study, a small room Grant rarely entered because he found my collection of financial journals boring. I sat down at my desk and opened my personal laptop. It was not connected to the company server directly, but it didn't need to be. I had built the back doors myself years ago, purely for remote maintenance and emergency auditing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My heart was not racing. I felt a strange, icy calm. Grant wanted to replace me. He wanted to claim my work as his own and trade me in for a younger, shinier model who would not threaten his fragile ego with actual competence. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just the supportive wife who would take a settlement and disappear into the suburbs. He had forgotten who I was before I was Mrs. Grant Whitmore. He had forgotten that before I was his wife, I was the best financial forensic analyst in Minneapolis. I knew how to find money, and more importantly, I knew how to make it disappear. I created a new folder on my desktop. I did not name it divorce. I did not name it Grant. I typed 3 words in all capital letters: exit, proof, ownership. I hit enter. The folder sat there on the black screen, a digital bomb waiting for the fuse. Tonight, Grant Whitmore thought he had fired me from my role as his wife. He did not realize that I had just promoted myself to his executioner. I was going to pull the plug on his entire empire, wire by wire, dollar by dollar, until he understood exactly who had been keeping the lights on all these years. The game had started, and he didn't even know the clock was running. The screen of my laptop glowed in the semi-darkness of the study, a single square of light in a room swallowed by shadows. I stared at the blinking cursor inside the folder named Exit, but my mind was drifting backward, pulling me away from the cold reality of Chicago and returning me to Minneapolis. 10 years ago, back then, I was not Madeline Whitmore, the silent, decorative wife of a real estate tycoon. I was Madeline Pierce, a senior restructuring consultant who specialized in saving companies that were bleeding out. I was 30 years old, sharp as a tack, and I lived my life in 6-minute billable increments. I did not care about galas. I cared about balance sheets, debt covenants, and the brutal, beautiful logic of mathematics. I met Grant when he was drowning. He was 29, handsome in a desperate, frantic sort of way, and he had inherited a small portfolio of commercial properties from his father that he was systematically destroying. He had vision, he claimed, he had passion. What he actually had was a cash burn rate of $50,000 a month and a complete inability to understand that revenue was not the same thing as profit. I remembered our first meeting in a coffee shop in the North Loop. He had spread blueprints across the table, talking wildly about luxury condos and mixed-use spaces. I had ignored the drawings and asked for his financials. When he handed over the crumpled spreadsheets, I saw the truth immediately. He was leveraged to his eyeballs. He was borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and Paul was about to break his kneecaps. "You have 3 months before you are insolvent," I had told him, pushing the papers back. "Maybe 2, if the interest rates hike." He had looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. The charm evaporated. The arrogance vanished. At that moment, he was just a boy who had broken his father's toy and didn't know how to glue it back together. "Help me," he had said. "Please, I do not know what I'm doing." And I did. God help me. I did. I did not just give him advice. I took over. I stepped into the chaotic mess of the Whitmore Lennox Group, which back then was just Whitmore Properties, and I gutted it. I worked 80-hour weeks for a year. I renegotiated every single vendor contract. I sat across from hard-nosed bankers who looked at Grant with disdain, and I made them listen to me. I built a capital model from scratch, a complex system that tracked every cent of liquidity and forecasted cash flow with 95% accuracy. I saved him. It was my relationships that opened the doors. The lawyers who drafted the new incorporation papers were my former colleagues. The private family office that put up the first $5 million in seed capital for his expansion did so because they knew my track record in Minneapolis. not because they liked Grant's smile. I introduced him to the zoning commissioners I had charmed during my years in urban planning consulting. For the first 3 years, we were a team, a real team. Grant handled the handshake, and I handled the reality. We celebrated our first $10 million quarter with cheap takeout on the floor of our first office, laughing until our sides hurt. He had looked at me then, with genuine adoration, and told me I was the smartest person he had ever met. He told me he could not breathe without me. But success is a funny thing. It acts like a slow-acting poison on the ego. As the company grew, as we moved from Minneapolis to the skyscrapers of Chicago, as the zeros on the bank accounts multiplied, Grant began to change. The we in his sentences slowly mutated into I. I decided to pivot the strategy, he would say to the press, referring to a plan I had spent 3 weeks developing. I secured the financing, he would tell the board, talking about a deal I had closed over a 4-hour dinner with a skeptical investor while Grant was golfing. The erasure was not violent. It was surgical. It started with him forgetting to copy me on emails. Then, he stopped inviting me to the preliminary strategy meetings. When I asked why, he would smile that condescending smile and say he didn't want to bore me with the minutiae, or that he wanted me to relax and enjoy the fruits of our labor. Then came the image consultants. "Madeline," Grant had said one evening 5 years ago, holding up a beige dress I loved. "This is too corporate. You are the wife of a CEO now. You need to look the part, softer, more elegant, less actuary, more artistry." He stripped me of my suits and put me in silk. He took away my spreadsheets and gave me charity committees. He slowly, methodically, peeled away every layer of my professional identity until I was nothing more than a glossy accessory to be worn on his arm. I became the woman who knew which fork to use for the salad, not the woman who knew how to structure a mezzanine debt facility. The board members who used to ask for my opinion on risk management now only asked me about my summer vacation plans. I had been filed away in the cabinet labeled wife, and in Grant's world, that drawer was locked. But Grant made a critical miscalculation. He assumed that because I was silent, I was asleep. I sat back in my chair in the West Loop apartment, the memory fading into the cold present. Grant thought I spent my days shopping and lunching with other socialites. He did not know about the encrypted server I maintained. He did not know that I still worked as a high-level strategic consultant for a select group of clients under a pseudonym, purely to keep my mind sharp and my own bank account healthy. More importantly, he did not know that I had administrative access to the back end of the WLG accounting system. I had built the original architecture, and I had left myself a key. For the last 6 months, I had been watching. I had noticed the anomalies. At first, I thought it was just incompetence. Grant was prone to laziness when I wasn't there to check his math. But as I dug deeper, I realized it was systematic. There was a circle of sycophants around him now. Sloan Kerr, the VP of Mergers and Acquisitions, Ethan Hale, the CFO, and a few others. They were feeding his ego. Yes, but they were also feeding him inflated numbers. I opened a file I had downloaded 2 weeks ago. It was a valuation report for a series of commercial properties in the South Loop. The numbers were absurd. They were projecting rental yields at 40% above market rate to justify a higher asset valuation. They were pumping the company's worth to secure massive loans from institutional lenders. It was a house of cards. If the market dipped even 2%, the loan covenants would trigger, and the whole thing would collapse. Grant was walking a tightrope over a canyon of debt, and he was doing it blindfolded. But why Grant was greedy? But he was usually risk-averse. Why would he take such a massive gamble? I clicked on a new email thread I had intercepted earlier that day. It was between Grant and the head of the legal department, a man named Marcus, who had always made my skin crawl. The subject line was Signatory Authority, Project Gemini. I frowned. Project Gemini was a shell company I had seen referenced in the margins of the ledger, but I had assumed it was just a holding vehicle for tax purposes. I opened the attachment. It was a draft of a power of attorney document and a board resolution. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, and my blood ran cold. The document outlined a transfer of liability. It designated a new primary signatory for the loans associated with the inflated South Loop properties. The text was dense, meant to be skimmed and signed without reading, buried in a stack of other routine paperwork. The name typed on the signature line was not Grant Whitmore, it was Madeline Pierce Whitmore. I sat there, frozen. The silence of the room was deafening. Grant was not just planning to divorce me, he was planning to frame me. By assigning me as the primary signatory on these toxic assets, he was creating a firewall. When the loans inevitably defaulted, when the bank auditors realized the valuations were fraudulent, the signature on the documents would be mine. He could claim ignorance. He could say that his wife, the former financial expert, handled those specific investments. He could paint himself as the victim of a scheming spouse who had cooked the books. He would walk away with the clean assets, and I would be left with the debt, the lawsuits, and potentially a prison sentence for fraud. "You deserve better," he had said to me at the gala tonight. "I can do better." It wasn't just an insult, it was a goodbye. He was discarding me, but he was going to make sure I was destroyed on the way out so I could never come back to haunt him. I looked at the screen, at my name sitting there in black and white, waiting for a signature he likely intended to forge or trick me into providing. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. It was the only tear I would shed. I wiped it away with the back of my hand. He thought I was a prop. He thought I was the woman who smiled and nodded and planned dinner parties. He had forgotten the woman who had sat across from wolves in Minneapolis and made them heal. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had not used in years, but had never deleted. It was late, past midnight, but I knew the man on the other end would be awake. He was a forensic accountant who owed me a favor from a messy audit in 2015. "Hello?" a groggy voice answered. "It is Madeline," I said, my voice steady, stripped of all emotion. "I need you to open a secure channel. I have a data dump coming your way, and it is going to be heavy. Madeline." He sounded awake now. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, looking at the damning document on my screen. "But it is about to be very expensive for someone else." I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights of Chicago flicker like distant stars, and I began to dismantle the life I had built, one file at a time. Grant wanted to put my name on his crimes. Fine, I would make sure that when the name Madeline Pierce appeared, it would be the last thing he ever saw as a free man. Tuesday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air in the Whitmore Lennox Group headquarters on the 42nd floor was always filtered to a crisp 68 degrees, a temperature designed to keep heart rates low and alertness high. I walked into the main conference room 5 minutes early, my heels making no sound on the plush gray carpet that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a week. I naturally moved toward the seat to the right of the head of the table. That had been my seat for 7 years. It was the seat where I had negotiated the acquisition of the derelict rail yards in the West Loop. It was the seat where I had stared down federal regulators until they blinked. Grant was already there, standing at the head of the table, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Italian shirt. He looked up as I approached, his eyes flickering with a mix of annoyance and amusement. "Not there, Madeline," he said, his voice casual, loud enough for the early arrivals to hear. He pointed a manicured finger toward the far end of the long, polished walnut table, the overflow seating, the place where junior analysts and interns sat when they were allowed in the room to take notes. "Why don't you sit back there today? We have the senior partners coming in. I need the real players up front." The insult was not subtle. It was a slap in the face delivered with a smile. I paused, my hand resting on the back of my old chair. I could feel the leather, cool and familiar, under my fingertips. For a second, I considered challenging him. I considered listing exactly who had structured the equity deal he was about to present, but I did not. I was gathering evidence, not enemies, not yet. "Of course," I said, my voice smooth. "I would not want to be in the way." I walked the length of the table, feeling the eyes of the staff on me. Sloane Kerr was already seated on Grant's left, the position of the trusted advisor. She wore a crimson blouse that clashed violently with the muted tones of the room, a deliberate choice to draw the eye. As I passed her, she did not look at me. She was busy scrolling through her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. She knew, they all knew, I was being demoted in real time. I took my seat at the far end, placing my notebook on the table. From this distance, Grant looked like a king holding court. The room filled up quickly. Ethan Hale, the CFO, hurried in, looking pale and sweating slightly despite the chill in the room. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away, burying his nose in a stack of spreadsheets. Guilt was a heavy coat, and Ethan wore it poorly. The meeting began. Grant launched into a presentation about the South Loop development, Project Gemini. He spoke with his usual charisma, using big words to mask shallow concepts. He talked about synergy and paradigm shifts and aggressive vertical integration. He was selling a dream. I sat in silence, listening to him lie. He claimed the pre-sales for the residential units were at 40%. I knew for a fact, based on the real data I had pulled the night before, that they were barely scratching 12%. He claimed the environmental impact study had cleared with 0 issues. I knew there was a pending lawsuit regarding soil contamination that he had buried in a subfolder labeled Miscellaneous Legal. The board members nodded, entranced. They saw the confident jawline, the expensive suit, the projected graphs that pointed up and to the right. They did not see the rot underneath. 40 minutes into the meeting, the atmosphere shifted. Grant was wrapping up his pitch on the financing structure. He paused, frowning slightly, patting the pockets of his jacket. He looked around the table, putting on a show of mild distress. "Ah," he said, snapping his fingers. "I seem to have left the signature file for the mezzanine loan on the credenza." The credenza was behind me, near the door. Grant had a personal assistant, a young man named David who was standing right by the door, ready to serve. Grant also had Sloane sitting right next to him, closer to the documents than anyone else, but Grant's eyes locked onto me, all the way at the other end of the table. The room went quiet. The air grew heavy, charged with a sudden, sharp tension. "Madeline," Grant said. It was not a question. It was a command. "Be a sweetheart and grab that blue folder for me. Would you? It is right behind you." He was treating me like a secretary. No, worse. He was treating me like a servant, in front of the entire executive team, in front of the people I had once hired and trained. He was reducing me to someone whose only utility was to fetch things. I saw Sloane cover her mouth with her hand to hide a giggle. It was a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the silence like a glass shard. Several of the junior VPs looked down at the table, embarrassed. Ethan Hale turned a shade of gray that matched the carpet. My heart hammered against my ribs. A slow, thudding rhythm of pure rage, but my face remained a mask of porcelain calm. If I refused, I looked emotional. If I argued, I looked hysterical. Grant had set a trap. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to prove that I was unstable or difficult, reinforcing the narrative he was spinning to the board. I stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back was the only noise in the room. I turned, walked the 3 steps to the credenza, and picked up the blue folder. It felt heavy in my hand, not because of the paper inside, but because of the weight of the humiliation attached to it. As I walked the length of the room toward Grant, I did not look at the floor. I looked straight ahead, and that was when I saw it, mounted in the corner of the ceiling. Discreetly blending into the acoustic paneling was a small black dome, a camera. Grant had installed a new security system 6 months ago, claiming it was for corporate espionage protection. I had reviewed the specs at the time, out of habit. It was a high-definition system with audio recording capabilities, but more importantly, I remembered the data retention policy because I had argued for it. The servers stored all boardroom footage for 90 days. Grant thought this moment was ephemeral. He thought this petty act of dominance would vanish as soon as the meeting ended, leaving only the memory of my submission. He was wrong. This was evidence. The camera was recording his tone. It was recording the laughter from Sloan. It was recording the awkward silence of the board members. It was recording a pattern of behavior that, when combined with the financial fraud I had already uncovered, would paint a picture of a CEO who was not only corrupt but toxic. I reached the head of the table and placed the folder in front of Grant. I did not slam it. I placed it gently, with precise alignment. Grant looked up at me. He did not say thank you. He leaned back in his chair, a smug, satisfied grin stretching across his face. He motioned for me to lean in, as if he had a secret to share. I leaned down, keeping my face neutral. "You are good at this," he whispered, loud enough for Sloan and the people nearby to hear, but quiet enough to be plausible deniability. "Stick to the domestic tasks. Madeline, do not embarrass me by trying to play business executive. You make me lose points with the serious people." He winked. It was a gut punch. It was designed to hollow me out. He was telling me that my decade of work, the nights I slept on the floor of this office, the millions of dollars I had saved him, it was all a joke to him. To him, I was just a housewife playing dress-up. I straightened up. I looked him in the eye. For a brief second, I let the mask slip, just enough for him to see the abyss staring back. I saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes, a momentary wobble in his confidence. He expected tears. He expected shame. He did not expect the cold, dead vacuum of a woman who had already decided his fate. "Is there anything else, Grant?" I asked, my voice steady and clear. "No," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Go sit down." I turned and walked back to my seat at the kids' table. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote down the exact time, 10:42 in the morning. The meeting dragged on for another hour, but I heard none of it. I was busy constructing a subpoena in my head. I knew exactly which IT administrator had access to the video logs. His name was Kevin, and I had helped his sister get a scholarship to an art program 3 years ago. Kevin would not delete the footage if I asked him to preserve it for a legal review. When the meeting finally adjourned, Grant stood up and was immediately surrounded by his sycophants. Sloan was practically hanging off his arm, laughing at a joke that was not funny. They looked like the prom king and queen of a high school built on fraud. I did not wait for him. I gathered my things and walked out the door. Bypassing the elevator bank where the executives gathered, I took the service elevator, the one used for catering and maintenance. It smelled of cleaning solution and stale coffee, but it was empty. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from the shared calendar, dinner with the investor relations team, 7:00 p.m. I deleted it. I walked out of the building and into the blinding brightness of the Chicago afternoon. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my skin, but I welcomed the pain. It felt real. It felt grounding. I sat in the back of my car, the leather seat cold against my legs. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread with Grant. The last message from him was from 2 days ago, asking me to pick up his dry cleaning. I typed slowly, my fingers steady. I did not write a paragraph. I did not demand an apology. I did not ask about Sloan or the fraud or the insults. I needed to draw a line in the concrete, a boundary that would signal the shift in power. Even if he did not understand it yet, do not touch me again. Starting today, I hit send. I watched the little delivered receipt appear. I knew he would read it and laugh. He would think I was sulking. He would think I was throwing a tantrum. He would show it to Sloan, and they would roll their eyes at the emotional wife. Let them laugh. I looked up at the glass tower of the Whitmore Lennox Group piercing the sky. I wasn't just going to leave him. I was going to evict him. I was going to take the building, the business, and the reputation he cherished more than his own soul. I tapped the driver on the shoulder. "Take me to the bank," I said. "The one on LaSalle Street. I have a safety deposit box to open." I sat in the climate-controlled silence of my car, parked 2 blocks away from the Whitmore Lennox Tower. My hands were resting on the steering wheel, not gripping it, just resting. They were steady. The rage that had threatened to consume me in the boardroom had distilled into something colder and far more useful. It had become fuel. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone against the dashboard. Rage is a clumsy weapon, loud and messy, and I needed to be surgical. I had 3 calls to make. These were not calls to complain. These were airstrikes targeting the structural pillars of Grant's world. I picked up my phone and dialed the first number. It was Elias Thorne, the managing partner of the Sterling Family Trust. They were the primary liquidity providers for the new South Loop project, the ones scheduled to wire $25 million into the WLG operating account by Friday noon. Grant needed that money to cover the interest payments on the toxic loans he was hiding. Without it, the house of cards would not just wobble, it would incinerate. Elias answered on the second ring. "Madeline, this is a surprise. I usually only hear from Grant these days." "Hello, Elias," I said. My voice was warm, professional. The voice of the woman who had made him 40% returns 3 years running. "I am calling as a courtesy. I know the disbursement is scheduled for Friday." "Yes, we are all set," Elias said. Though I could hear the hesitation, he knew I never called just to chat. "I would strongly advise you to pause that transfer," I said. I kept my tone light, as if I were suggesting a wine pairing. "There are some internal governance discussions happening at the board level regarding risk allocation. Until those are resolved, a transfer of that magnitude might be complicated." There was silence on the line. Elias was a shark, but he was a cautious shark. He understood the code. Governance discussions where corporates speak for the ship is taking on water and the captain is lying about it. "Governance discussions," Elias repeated slowly. "Is Grant aware you are calling me?" "Grant is focusing on the optics," I said. "I am focusing on your capital protection. You know how I work, Elias. I do not like surprises, and I do not want you to be surprised." "I see," Elias said. The warmth was gone, replaced by the icy calculation of a money manager. "Thank you, Madeline. I think we will hold the wire pending a full compliance review. Tell Grant I will be in touch." The line went dead. $25 million evaporated from Grant's balance sheet in under 2 minutes. I dialed the second number. This one was harder. Julian Vance ran a boutique audit firm that Grant had fired 2 years ago. Grant had called Julian pedantic and annoying because Julian insisted on verifying every single vendor invoice. Grant wanted a rubber stamp. Julian wanted the truth. "Madeline Pierce," Julian said, his voice dry. "I assumed I was persona non grata at the Kingdom of Whitmore." Grant was short-sighted. "Julian," I said immediately, "we both know that. I am calling because the board is beginning to realize that replacing you with a cheaper firm might have been a catastrophic error." "Is that so?" Julian asked. I could hear the intrigue in his voice. "And what leads them to this epiphany?" "Discrepancies," I said. "Significant variances between the projected rental yields and the actual bank deposits, the kind of variances that look less like accounting errors and more like creative fiction." I let the words hang there. Julian lived for this. He hated corruption the way a doctor hates cancer. "I am not asking you to do anything yet," I continued. "But if a motion were put forward by a shareholder to appoint an independent forensic auditor to protect the equity value, would you be available to step in immediately?" "For you, Madeline?" "Yes," Julian said. "But if I come back, I tear the floorboards up. No closed doors." "That is exactly what I'm counting on," I said. "Keep your schedule open for next week. 2 pillars down." The money was frozen. The watchdog was waking up. I dialed the third number. This was not a business partner. This was personal defense. I called Naomi Klein, a ruthless divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset separations. We had met at a charity gala years ago, and she had handed me her card with a knowing look, as if she knew this day would come eventually. "Madeline," Naomi said. She did not sound surprised. "I was wondering when you would call." "It is time," I said. "But this is not just a separation. Naomi, I need you to open the file today. But my primary concern is not the alimony or the penthouse." "What is the priority?" she asked. "Indemnity," I said. "He is going to try to pin corporate malfeasance on me. I need a shield. I need to establish a timeline that proves I was excluded from decision-making authority for the last 18 months. "I can do that," Naomi said, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. But I need proof. Emails, memos, logs. You will have them, I promised. I am securing the package tonight. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a secure message on an encrypted app I used with a select few contacts. It was from a junior legal associate named Sarah, a girl I had mentored when she was just an intern. She was the only person in the legal department who still looked me in the eye. The message was just an image, a screenshot of a document currently being drafted on Grant's private server. I zoomed in on the text. It was a retroactive liability waiver for the Project Gemini loans. It stated that all financial strategic decisions regarding the asset valuation were conducted under the direct supervision of Madeline Pierce, acting as an external consultant. It was a death sentence. He wasn't just firing me, he was building a scaffold to hang me. He was going to tell the SEC and the banks that his wife, the brilliant financial expert, had gone rogue and cooked the books without his knowledge. My blood ran cold, then hot. I started the engine and drove. Not home, not yet. I drove to a coffee shop with secure Wi-Fi. I needed to act now. If that document was signed and notarized, my battle would be 10 times harder. I opened my laptop. I logged into the WLG backend using the administrator credentials I had created 5 years ago, the ones Grant thought were deleted. I navigated to the financial reporting module. I did not delete the files. Deleting them would look like guilt. It would look like destruction of evidence. Instead, I used a weapon they didn't even know existed. Years ago, when I built the proprietary algorithm that predicted cash flow, I had registered the source code under my own name, not the company's. It was a piece of intellectual property I had licensed to WLG for $1 a year. I opened the command terminal. I typed in a sequence of code that updated the licensing verification. Revoke license user WLG admin, lock status read only, encryption key Alpha 9 protocol. I hit enter. Instantly, the dashboard on my screen turned gray. Across the entire company server, the financial modeling software would stop processing new data. They could look at the old numbers, but they could not change them. They could not generate new reports. They could not print the fraudulent valuations they needed for the meeting next week. And most importantly, every time they tried to access the core logic, a pop-up window would appear, intellectual property of Madeline Pierce. Access denied pending contract renewal. I had just turned off the engine of his Ferrari while he was driving it at 100 miles an hour. I closed the laptop. Now, I can go home. Grant was there when I walked into the penthouse. It was 9 in the evening. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a glass of scotch. He looked like a master of the universe, surveying his kingdom. He turned when I entered. He did not look angry. He looked pitiful. He had his sad but necessary face on. "Madeline," he said softly, "we need to talk." I set my purse down on the entry table. "Do we?" "I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said, walking over to the sofa and sitting down. He patted the cushion next to him, but I remained standing. "We have grown apart. You must feel it too. You are unhappy. I am unhappy. We are forcing something that died years ago." It was a rehearsed speech. I could practically see the cue cards in his eyes. And I asked, "And I think it is time we have a civilized separation," he said. He took a sip of his drink. "I want to be generous. Madeline, I know you haven't worked in a long time. You don't have your own income. So, I am prepared to offer you a very substantial settlement, enough to keep you comfortable. You can move back to Minneapolis, buy a nice little house, start over." Comfortable, little house. He was offering me hush money. He wanted to buy my silence and my departure so he could bring Sloan in and rewrite history. "And what about the company?" I asked. "What about my work?" He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Your work, Madeline? Honey, you haven't touched a spreadsheet in 5 years. The company has evolved beyond you. It is a beast now. You wouldn't even understand the current structures." He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea that 20 minutes ago, I had crippled his entire operation. He didn't know the bank had cut him off. He didn't know the auditor was sharpening his knives. "I see," I said. "So that is it. I take the money, and I leave." "It is for the best," he said, standing up and moving toward me. He reached out to touch my shoulder. I took a half step back. "Do not—" He stopped, his hand hovering in the air. He shrugged. "Fine, be difficult, but have the lawyers look at the papers in the morning. It is a good deal. Madeline, better than you deserve, considering how you embarrassed me today." He walked past me, heading toward the bedroom. "I am sleeping in the guest room tonight. I expect you to be gone by the weekend." I waited until I heard his door close. I did not go to the bedroom. I went to study. I did not pack clothes. I did not pack jewelry. I took a small black suitcase. I packed my hard drive. I packed the physical backup of the server logs I had kept for years. Then, I went to the safe behind the painting. I spun the dial. Inside, there was a stack of cash, my emergency fund, and a small, velvet box. I took the box. Inside was not a diamond necklace. Inside was a flash drive and a folded piece of paper, the original intellectual property agreement, signed by Grant Whitmore 10 years ago. Acknowledged that the code, the logic, and the financial architecture of WLG belonged solely to Madeline Pierce. He had signed it when he was desperate, when he would have signed away his soul for my help. He had forgotten it existed. I held the box in my hand. It weighed almost nothing, but it was heavy enough to crush a skyscraper. I walked to the front door of the penthouse. I looked back one last time at the sprawling living room, the expensive art, the cold, empty life I had inhabited. Grant was asleep in the other room, dreaming of his new life with Sloane, dreaming of the millions he thought he had secured. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The latch clicked shut behind me with a final, definitive sound. I checked my watch. It was 10 at night. The war had officially begun. And by the time the sun came up, Grant Whitmore would wake up to find that he was the captain of a sinking ship, and I was the ocean. The first 24 hours after I walked out of the penthouse were not spent crying into a pillow. I checked into a suite at the Langham, a hotel known for its discretion and its secure Wi-Fi. I set up my war room on the mahogany desk overlooking the Chicago River. I had my laptop, my encrypted hard drive, and a burner phone. I was not just a woman leaving her husband. I was a demolition expert watching the fuse burn down. Grant Whitmore believed he was a god. He believed the laws of physics and finance did not apply to him because he had a winning smile and a bespoke suit. But for the next 7 days, I taught him that gravity is undeniable. Day 1, the cash flow freeze. It started at 9 in the morning. I was drinking black coffee and watching the internal server logs. Grant was expecting the wire transfer from the Sterling Family Trust, $25 million. It was the oxygen he needed to keep the company breathing. Without it, he could not pay the contractors for the South Loop project, and he could not cover the interest payment on the mezzanine debt due on Friday. I saw the email land in his inbox at 9:15. It was from Elias Thorne. Subject regarding disbursement. Grant, per our internal risk assessment protocols, we are placing a hold on the capital release pending a secondary review of the governance structure. We will update you in 14 days. I could almost hear the scream from across the city. According to the audio logs from the executive suite, which I could still access because the security contractor had never changed the admin password, Grant did not take it well. "What do you mean, a hold?" Grant shouted. I could hear the slam of a fist against a desk. "Get Elias on the phone. Tell him this is a breach of contract." "He is not answering." "Grant?" Sloane's voice replied. She sounded annoyed, not panicked. She did not understand the severity yet. "He says it is just market volatility. Everyone is being cautious." "It is not the market," Grant yelled. "It is incompetence, fix it." Grant spent the rest of the day screaming at junior associates, blaming the bond yield curve, blaming the weather, blaming everything except the woman he had discarded the night before. He did not know I had made the call. He just thought the universe was blinking. Day 2. The data blackout. This was the day the internal bleeding started. The board of directors had a scheduled review of the quarterly projections. Usually, Grant would have Ethan Hale, the CFO, print out the glossy reports generated by my algorithm. Those reports were the Bible of the company. They justified the bonuses, the stock price, and the ego. At 10 in the morning, Ethan tried to run the report. I watched the command terminal on my laptop screen. A request came in from user E. Hale. Run sequence cash flow forecast Q3. I watched my code respond. Access denied. License revoked. Intellectual property owner, Madeline Pierce. Ethan tried again, and again. 10 minutes later, an email went out from Ethan to Grant. Subject system glitch. Grant, we cannot pull the numbers for the board packet. The system is locking us out. It says something about license expiration. Grant replied 2 minutes later. Don't bother me with IT problems. Call the vendor. Just manually type up the spreadsheet based on last week's data. That was the fatal mistake. You cannot manually replicate a dynamic algorithm that processes 3,000 variables. When the board received the packet that afternoon, it was full of static numbers that did not make sense. The correlations were wrong. The risk ratios were off. By 4 in the afternoon, the first inquiry came from the audit committee. Grant, these figures do not match the bank reconciliations. Why is there a variance of $4 million in the operating account? Please clarify immediately. Grant blamed a clerical error. He told them the software was undergoing maintenance. He lied, and every lie he told was recorded on the server I was mirroring to my hard drive. Day 3, the landlocked nightmare. Wednesday was the day I pulled the rug out from under his feet physically. The Evanston development was Grant's crown jewel. It was a massive mixed-use project that was supposed to double the company's valuation, but the zoning approval was contingent on a specific environmental impact study that I had personally navigated through the city council 2 years ago. I made a phone call to an old friend in the city planning office. I did not ask him to do anything illegal. I simply reminded him to check the file. You know, I said casually, I recall that the soil remediation certificate was signed by a subcontractor who lost his license last month. You might want to double-check that before the final permits are issued. 2 hours later, a red tag was placed on the construction site. Work stoppage order, pending regulatory review. Grant was in the middle of a lunch with potential investors when he got the call. His foreman told him the cranes had stopped moving. Grant left the lunch halfway through the appetizer. He drove out to Evanston in his Porsche, storming into the trailer to scream at the city inspector. The inspector was not moved. Paperwork is paperwork, Mr. Whitmore. Until this is cleared, the site is closed. Every day the site sat idle cost the company $50,000 in penalties. Grant was burning cash he did not have, on a project he could not build, funded by loans he could not service. Day 4, the smear campaign. Grant realized he was losing control. So he did what weak men always do. He attacked my character. I woke up on Thursday morning to a notification on my phone, a link to a popular Chicago business gossip column. The headline read, Trouble in Paradise, WLG CEO, Grant Whitmore separates from wife amidst concerns over her mental health. The article was vicious. It quoted anonymous sources close to the couple, who claimed that I had been suffering from severe emotional instability and paranoia. It painted Grant as the long-suffering husband who had tried everything to help his troubled wife, but had finally been forced to step away for the sake of the business. Madeline has been struggling for a long time, the source said. She was becoming erratic. It was affecting the company culture. I sat in the hotel suite, reading the words on the screen. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold. He was trying to preemptively discredit me. If I went to the authorities about the fraud, he could point to this article and say, See, she is crazy. She is vindictive. You cannot trust her. It was a smart move, but it was also a desperate one. I opened a folder on my laptop labeled The Origin. Inside were 7 years of emails. I found the one I needed. It was dated 3 years ago. From Grant Whitmore to Madeline Pierce, subject RE algorithm. Credits, Maddie. I know you wrote the code. but we need to put my name on the patent filing. The investors need to see the CEO as the visionary. It is better for the stock price. You understand, right? Just remove your name from the header. It is for us." He had put it in writing. He had acknowledged my authorship and his intent to erase it for profit. I did not release the email to the press. I was not fighting a PR war. I was fighting a legal one. I forwarded the email to Naomi Klein, my lawyer. "Add this to the pile." I wrote, "Proof of premeditated intellectual property theft. Day 5. The rat looks for a lifeboat." Friday came, and the silence from the executive suite was deafening. The sterling money had not arrived. The Evanston site was still closed. The board was demanding answers about the software glitch. At 2 p.m, my encrypted messaging app pinged. I looked at the ID. It was Ethan Hale. Ethan was a coward, but he was a calculator. He knew how to count, and he knew that without the $25 million, the payroll checks were going to bounce next week. Ethan Madeline. I did not reply. I let the cursor blink. Ethan. "Look, I know things are bad between you and Grant. I saw the article. I don't believe it." Still I waited. Ethan. "The system is still locked. Grant is making us manually enter numbers. But they don't look right. He's asking me to adjust the cap rates on the South Loop properties to cover the shortfall. He wants me to sign off on a valuation that is double the market rate." I smiled. There it was. He was admitting the fraud to me. He was looking for permission. Or perhaps absolution. "Ethan, are you coming back? We need the access key. If you don't come back, I don't think we can survive the audit next week." I typed a single sentence. "I am not coming back." Ethan, and if I were you, I would not sign that valuation unless you look good in an orange jumpsuit. I saw the read receipt appear instantly. Ethan went offline 5 seconds later. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was shredding documents and calling his own lawyer. The circle was breaking. Day 6, the smoking gun. Saturday. The desperation had set in. Grant was in the office on a weekend. He was alone. Sloan was allegedly at a spa. Rats are the first to flee. After all, I was monitoring the bank logs. Grant was moving money. He was trying to plug the holes before Monday morning. At 4 p.m, a transaction appeared on the screen. It was a transfer of $200,000 from the tenant security deposit account, a restricted account that was illegal to touch for operating expenses. Grant moved the money to a vendor I did not recognize. GMW Holdings, LLC. I frowned. I quickly ran a search on the Secretary of State's database. GMW Holdings. The registered agent was a generic service, but the mailing address was a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. I dug deeper. I cross-referenced the tax ID number with Grant's personal tax returns from 2 years ago, the ones I had filed for him. It matched. Grant was not just paying a vendor, he was paying himself. He was skimming money from the company, hiding it in a shell company, likely to build himself an escape hatch. He had just committed felony embezzlement, and because he was tired, because he was panicked, and because I wasn't there to stop him. He had done it using his corporate login, leaving a digital fingerprint that glowed like neon. I took a screenshot. I downloaded the transaction receipt. I leaned back in my chair. The sun was setting over the river, turning the water a bloody shade of orange. I had him. I had IP theft. I had fraudulent valuations. I had bank fraud. And now, I had the embezzlement. I closed my laptop. It was over. I had enough ammunition to bury him under the jail for 20 years. Day 7. The call. Sunday. The 7th day. I was packing my equipment. My plan was simple. Monday morning, I would walk into the U.S. Attorney's office with my hard drive. I would hand them Grant Whitmore on a silver platter. I would clear my name, watch him fall, and then disappear to Europe for a year. I was zipping up my suitcase when my personal cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was an unknown number, no caller ID. I assumed it was Grant, calling from a burner phone to beg or threaten. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something stopped me. The area code was not Chicago, it was New York. I swiped the green button. "This is Madeline." "Mrs. Whitmore," a voice said. It was a man's voice. smooth, low, and terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a man who owned the building, not the man who rented the office. "Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Adrian Vale," the voice said. "I am the chairman of the Strategic Oversight Committee for the Whitmore-Lennox Board." I froze. Adrian Vale was a ghost. He was the money behind the money. He never attended meetings. He never sent emails. He was the legend who controlled the fates of CEOs from the shadows. "I know who you are," I said, keeping my voice steady. "If you are calling to threaten me with a lawsuit for the system lockout, you can speak to my lawyer. I am not calling to sue you." "Madeline," Adrian said. There was a hint of amusement in his tone. "I am calling because I have been watching the logs for the last 7 days." My grip tightened on the phone. "What logs?" "All of them," he said. "The bank transfers, the IP alerts, the frantic emails from Ethan Hale, and the transaction to GMW Holdings yesterday. Sloppy work by your husband, very sloppy." "So you know," I said. "I know that the company is hollow," Adrian said. "I know that Grant is a fraud, and I know that the only reason the lights stayed on for the last 5 years is because you were in the basement shoveling coal into the furnace." I said nothing. "The board is meeting in an emergency session tomorrow morning," Adrian continued. "We are going to remove Grant. That is a foregone conclusion." "Good," I said. "Then my work is done." "Not quite," Adrian said. "You see, firing Grant crashes the stock. It panics the lenders. We need a stabilizer. We need someone who knows where the bodies are buried because she is the one who dug the graves." My heart stopped beating for a second. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Adrian replied, his voice dropping an octave, "that the board does not want you to testify. Madeline, they want you to take the chair. We want you as the interim CEO." I stared at my reflection in the hotel window. Me, the wife, the prop, the accessory. "And if I say no," I asked, "then the company collapses. The assets are liquidated, and your name is dragged through the mud along with his." Adrian said simply, "But if you say yes, you get to be the one who fires him." A smile touched my lips, a real smile. Not the one I used at galas. "Tell me where and when," I said. The phone felt heavy in my hand, a cold slab of glass and metal that connected me to a ghost. Adrian Vale was not a man who made phone calls. He was a man who had people make calls for him. In the hierarchy of the Whitmore-Lennox group, Grant was the face, the loud, charismatic frontman who shook hands and cut ribbons. But Adrian Vale was the spine. He was the director of strategy, a title that meant nothing and everything. He represented the quiet money, the institutional investors who did not care about gala photos or magazine covers. They cared about yield, risk, and silence. I had met him only once, 5 years ago, at a closing dinner for the acquisition of the rail yards. He had said 3 words to me the entire night: "Check the warranty." He had been right. Then there was a hidden liability clause in the warranty deed that the lawyers had missed. I fixed it. He had nodded at me from across the room, and that was the extent of our relationship. Now, his voice was in my ear, crisp and devoid of static, as if he were standing in the room with me at the Langham. "I am listening," I said. "Good," Adrian replied. "Because we do not have much time. The market opens in 12 hours. By the closing bell tomorrow, one of 2 things will happen. Either Grant Whitmore will be removed from his position, or the company will be placed under investigation by the SEC. I walked over to the window. The city lights were blurring in the rain that had started to fall. "Grant thinks he is in control," I said. "Grant is a child playing with matches in a library," Adrian said. His tone was not insulting. It was merely descriptive. "He has spent the last 48 hours trying to move capital between accounts to cover the shortfall from the sterling freeze. He thinks we do not see it. We see everything." "If you see it, why call me?" I asked. "You have enough to fire him for cause. You do not need his wife involved." "We do not need his wife," Adrian corrected. "We need an architect, The word hung in the air. Architect. It was a title I had never held, never been given, but one I had earned in blood and sleepless nights. Grant has built a narrative, Adrian continued. He has prepared a file for the board meeting tomorrow. In that file are documents, backdated 18 months, assigning oversight of the valuation models to you. He claims you were acting as an independent consultant. He claims the inflated numbers came from your personal algorithm. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. I had suspected it. I had seen the draft. But hearing it confirmed by the man who held the axe was different. He is trying to frame me, I said. He is trying to survive, Adrian said. He knows the audit is coming. He needs a body to throw to the wolves. He has chosen you. And the board? I asked. Do they believe him? Half of them do, Adrian said. They are scared. They see the stock price wobbling. They want a scapegoat. If Grant says it was his unstable, estranged wife who cooked the books, it gives them a clean story. They can fire him for lack of oversight, sue you for fraud, and tell the shareholders they have purged the cancer. But you don't believe him, I said. I deal, in fact, Mrs. Whitmore. Adrian said. And the facts are these. For the last 5 years, every time the company faced a liquidity crisis, a solution appeared out of nowhere. A complex debt restructuring, a sudden renegotiation of vendor terms, a predictive model that saved us from the retail crash. Grant takes the credit, but Grant cannot do the math. I checked his college transcripts. He barely passed calculus. I felt a strange, cold thrill run down my spine. Someone had noticed. So I went digging, Adrian said, and I found something interesting. A board member, who shall remain nameless for now, kept a hard copy of the original restructuring proposal from Minneapolis, the one from 10 years ago. The metadata on the digital file had been scrubbed, but the physical copy had handwriting in the margins. My handwriting. You built this company, Adrian said. Grant just put his name on the door. I closed my eyes. For 10 years, I had screamed into the void, and finally, the void was answering back. So what do you want, Adrian? I asked. The board is split, he said. The old guard wants to protect Grant and blame you. The new money, my faction wants to cut the head off the snake. We are going to call a vote of no confidence tomorrow morning, but we cannot just fire the CEO. The market hates a vacuum. If we fire Grant without a replacement, the stock tanks, the loans get called, and we all lose money. He paused. We need a name, he said. We need someone who knows the system. Someone who can step in, clean up the books, and calm the investors. We want you, Madeline. We want you to serve as interim CEO. The silence in the hotel room was absolute. Interim CEO. It was the ultimate vindication. To take the seat he had denied me. To sit at the head of the table where he had forced me to sit at the foot. But I was not naive. I knew how these games were played. Who fears me most? I asked. It was not the question he expected. I heard a slight intake of breath on the other end of the line. Excuse me? Adrian asked. You said the board is split, I said, my voice sharp. You said half of them want to believe Grant's lie because it is easy. If you bring me in, you are not just bringing in a new CEO. You are bringing in the woman who knows where every skeleton is buried. I am not a safe choice. Adrian, I am the nuclear option. So I will ask you again. Who is afraid of me? Everyone, Adrian said. The amusement was back in his voice, darker this time. Ethan Hale is terrified you will send him to prison. The audit committee is terrified you will expose their negligence. I am even concerned that you might burn the house down just to kill the termites. And yet you are calling me, I said. I prefer a controlled burn to a wildfire. Adrian said. Grant is a wildfire. You are precise. I can work with precision. I have conditions, I said. I assumed you would, Adrian replied. But first, we need to formalize this. You need to come in. Tonight. Tonight? There is a pre-meeting session happening in 2 hours, Adrian said. At the private club on East Wacker, just the executive committee, we need to vet you. We need to see if you can handle the room before we put your name on the ballot. I will call my lawyer, I said. No, Adrian said. The word was like a steel door slamming shut. No lawyers, I stiffened. I do not walk into rooms with wolves without a weapon. Adrian, if you bring a lawyer, it becomes a negotiation, Adrian said. This is not a negotiation. This is an interview. If you walk in with legal counsel, the board will see you as an adversary. They will close ranks around Grant. You need to walk in there alone. You need to look them in the eye and show them that you do not need a lawyer to protect you because you are the smartest person in the room. It was a trap, or it was a test. If I went alone, I had no protection. Anything I said could be used against me. They could ambush me, coerce me into signing a confession, or twist my words to validate Grant's narrative. But if I didn't go, Grant won. I looked at the clock. It was 8 p.m. Fine, I said. I will come alone. Good, Adrian said. I will send a car. No, I cut him off. I will drive myself. And Adrian. Yes, I am coming alone, I said. But the rules of the room change when I walk in. I want a stenographer present. A court-certified reporter to transcribe every word said in that meeting. And I want a representative from Julian Vance's independent audit firm in the room as a silent observer. That is highly irregular, Adrian said. You said you wanted precision, I countered. Transparency is precision. If the board has nothing to hide, they will not mind a record. If they refuse, I will not walk in, and tomorrow morning I will go to the FBI instead of the boardroom. There was a long pause. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. You drive a hard bargain. Mrs. Whitmore, Adrian said. I will have a stenographer, and I will call Vance. 1 hour, I said. Madeline, Adrian said, just as I was about to hang up. What? Do not mistake this for a job offer, he said. His voice dropped to a whisper that was colder than the wind off the lake. You are not a candidate. You are not a rising star we are looking to cultivate. Grant has rigged the ship to explode. We are not hiring you to fly it. We are hiring you because you are the only one who knows how to cut the red wire. You are not our choice. You are our only escape plan. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. My hand was trembling. Just a little. Not from fear. From adrenaline. I walked to the closet and pulled out my suit. Not the beige silk Grant liked. Not the soft pastels that made me look harmless. I pulled out a suit I had not worn in 6 years. Charcoal gray, sharp shoulders, tailored to kill. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I applied my makeup with the precision of war paint. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the wife. She was not the victim. She was the architect. I picked up the black box containing the flash drive with the IP agreement. I put it in my purse. 1 hour, I whispered to the empty room. I walked out of the hotel suite, and for the first time in 10 years, I did not feel like I was walking in someone else's shadow. I was the one casting it. I did not drive straight to the private club on East Wacker. That would have been suicide. Adrian Vale wanted me to walk into the lion's den alone, armed only with my wits. But I knew better. In the world of high-stakes corporate warfare, wits are useless without evidence, and evidence is useless without a lawyer who knows how to wield it like a scalpel. I pulled my car to the curb in front of a brownstone in the Gold Coast. It was the office of Klein and Mercer, LLP. The lights were still on in the second-floor window. Naomi Klein did not sleep. She waited. I buzzed the intercom, and the heavy oak door clicked open. Naomi was waiting for me in her conference room, a space that smelled of lemon polish and old leather. She was a woman of 50 with hair cut sharp enough to draw blood and eyes that had seen every variety of marital betrayal. She did not hug me. She pointed to a chair. You look like you are dressed for a funeral, she said, eyeing my charcoal suit. I am, I said, placing my hard drive on the table. But not mine. Adrian Vale called me, Naomi said, sitting down opposite me. He told me you are going into the boardroom tomorrow. He told me to stand down. And I told him to go to hell, Naomi said. She slid a thick file folder across the polished mahogany table. Because if you walk into that room without seeing this first, you will not be walking out as the CEO. You will be walking out in handcuffs. I looked at the folder. It was labeled Whitmore, Internal Compliance. What is this? I asked. My team pulled the digital filings from the county clerk's office an hour ago. Naomi said, Grant has been busy. He filed a document yesterday morning. It is a post-nuptial amendment to your original marriage contract. I frowned. We never signed a post-nup. Grant asked for one 5 years ago, but I refused. Open it, Naomi commanded. I flipped the cover. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, skipping over the whereas and herein clauses until I reached the bottom of page 4. There, in blue ink, was my signature. It was perfect. The slant of the M, the loop of the P. It was indistinguishable from the signature I had used on thousands of checks and contracts. I never signed this, I whispered, my voice cold. Read the indemnity clause above it, Naomi said. I read it. The undersigned, Madeline Pierce Whitmore, hereby accepts full legal and financial liability for all independent consulting strategies implemented under the project code name Gemini, and acknowledges that she acted outside the scope of WLG corporate oversight. The room seemed to tilt. This was not just a forgery. This was a confession. Grant had forged my signature on a document that legally claimed I had gone rogue. He was not just pinning the bad loans on me, he was pinning the intent to defraud me. He is going to use this tomorrow, I said, looking up at Naomi. He is going to present this to the board. He will say, Look, I have a signed confession from my wife. She went crazy. She cooked the books, and she signed this waiver to try to fix it before I caught her. Exactly, Naomi said. And since it is notarized likely by a paid-off notary, it is presumed valid until proven otherwise. By the time you prove it is a fake in court, the FBI will have already raided your apartment. I felt a surge of nausea, but I pushed it down. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. How did he get the signature? I asked. It is too perfect to be freehand. Naomi turned her laptop around. We ran a forensic analysis on the digital timestamp. This document was created and signed electronically using a stylus on a tablet, specifically, an iPad Pro registered to the WLG executive account. I looked at the device ID string, device MP Personal 01. It was my iPad, the one I left on the nightstand every night. He used my own device, I realized. He waited until I was asleep, took my iPad, unlocked it. He knows my passcode is our anniversary and used the stylus to trace my signature from an old file onto this new one. The metadata shows the device was located in the penthouse master bedroom at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. Tuesday, I said. The night after the gala. The night he told me he could do better. He was not sleeping next to you, Naomi said. He was framing you. I stared at the screen. It was a violation so intimate, so calculated, that it made the infidelity with Sloane seem like a minor rudeness. He had lain beside me in the dark, listening to my breathing, while he stole my life. Can we prove it? I asked. We can prove the device was used, Naomi said, but he will claim you signed it in bed. It is your word against his document. No, I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots. It is not my word. It is the log. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. Naomi, look at the timestamp again. 3:15 in the morning. Yes. At 3:15 in the morning last Tuesday, my biometric health data shows I was in deep sleep. I said, my watch tracks it, but more importantly, at 3:15 in the morning, the server logs show that Grant's user profile was active on the main network, approving the transfer of the funds to the shell company. He made a mistake. He logged into the bank on his phone while he was signing the forgery on my iPad. 2 devices, 2 different crimes. 1 timestamp, Naomi said, a slow smile spreading across her face. He cannot be in 2 places at once. If he says he was watching you sign the document, he admits he was awake. If he admits he was awake, We hit him with the bank transfer. I need to build a dossier, I said. 2 layers. I opened a fresh file on my laptop. Layer 1, I said. Competence. I need to prove to the board that I'm the only one who understands math. I have the original code, the email chains, the strategy memos he stole. And layer 2, Naomi asked. Criminality, I said. The forgery, the concurrent logins, the shell company transfers. I am not going into that meeting to defend myself. Naomi, I am going to walk in there with a loaded gun. You need insurance, Naomi said. Even with this evidence, the board might just fire you both to save face. They will call it a domestic dispute and wash their hands of the Whitmore family entirely. I know, I said. That is why I need Celia. Celia Rourke was the chairwoman of the board. She was 60 years old, a woman made of steel and pearls. She cared about 2 things: the stock price and the truth, usually in that order. Get her on the phone, I told Naomi. It is 10 at night, Naomi warned. She will answer for me. Naomi dialed the private number. She put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. This is Celia Rourke. Her voice was guarded. Celia, it is Madeline, I said. Madeline, Celia said. I hear you are meeting with the executive committee tonight. I assume you are calling to lobby for a vote. I am calling to offer you a trade, I said. I am listening. Grant has a document, I said. A forgery. He intends to present it tomorrow to implicate me in fraud. If he does that, I will be forced to release the forensic evidence that proves he embezzled $2 million from the tenant security fund. Silence, heavy and thick. If I release that evidence to the police, I continued, WLG stock will go to 0 by noon. The SEC will freeze your assets. The company will die. You are blackmailing the board, Celia said, her voice dropping. No, I am offering a lifeboat, I said. I will withhold the police report. I will keep the embezzlement internal. I will fix the books and stabilize the lenders. I will save your company. In exchange for what? Immunity, I said. I want a binding board resolution. Signed tonight before I walk into that room. A resolution that states the board has conducted an independent investigation and found Madeline Pierce innocent of all financial malfeasance regarding Project Gemini. I want full indemnification. You protect me from Grant's forgery, and I protect you from Grant's felony. Celia was silent for a long time. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall in Naomi's office. You are asking me to gamble the company on your word, Celia said. You are not gambling on my word, I said. You are gambling on my math. You know who built the models. Celia, you always knew. A sigh. I will have the corporate counsel draft the resolution. It will be ready when you arrive at the club. But Madeline, yes. If you fail to fix this, she said, I will personally testify against you. Fair enough, I said. I hung up. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian Vale. Grant just arrived at the club. He is holding a blue folder. He looks like he is ready to give a sermon. Hurry. He is there, I said to Naomi. He has the forgery. You have the evidence, Naomi said, handing me a USB drive containing the biometric data and the login logs. Go. I stood up. I felt lighter, sharper. But there was one nagging thought in the back of my mind. What if the board didn't care? What if they took my evidence, buried it, and fired me anyway just to be safe? I needed a kill switch, something that didn't rely on their goodwill. Wait, I said. I opened my laptop one last time. I went into the deepest archive, the folder labeled WLG Origins 2014. I searched for a specific keyword, intellectual property. I found it, the original founder's agreement, the one I had written when we were still working out of a garage, Clause 14. B. In the event of a dispute regarding the ownership of the proprietary algorithm, known as the Pierce model, the creator Madeline Pierce retains the absolute right to revoke the usage license immediately. Upon revocation, all data processed by said algorithm becomes the sole property of the creator and must be purged from company servers within 24 hours. It wasn't just about stopping the software. It was about the data. If I invoked Clause 14b, every financial report, every projection, every valuation generated in the last 10 years became my legal property. If WLG used them in a board meeting, or an SEC filing, or a bank application without my permission, they would be committing theft of trade secrets. I could legally prohibit them from showing their own financial statements to the public. I could blind the company. I smiled. It was a terrifying power, and it was mine. "I have it," I said to Naomi. "The final nail." "Good," Naomi said. She looked at me with a rare expression of respect. "Go get your name back." I walked out of the office and into the cool night air. I got into my car and drove toward East Walker. The city was a grid of lights and shadows, a chessboard of steel and glass. Grant was waiting for me. The board was waiting for me. They thought they were interviewing a candidate for interim CEO. They were wrong. They were about to meet the owner of the game. I pulled up to the valet stand at the private club. I handed the keys to the attendant. "Keep it close," I said. "I won't be long." I smoothed my jacket, checked the USB drive in my pocket, and walked through the revolving doors. The air inside smelled of money and cigars. I was not the obedient wife anymore. I was the storm. The heavy oak doors of the private club on East Walker closed behind me, shutting out the noise of the city, but locking me in with a different kind of predator. The air inside was thick with the smell of cigars and desperation. I had just finished the preliminary vetting with the executive committee, a grueling 2 hours of rapid-fire questions where I had dissected the company's failing liquidity ratios without looking at a single note. I passed. I saw it in their eyes. They were terrified of the truth, but they were more terrified of bankruptcy. I retreated to a small, private alcove near the cloakroom to check my phone. It was vibrating with the frantic energy of rats sensing rising water. The first call was from Ethan Hale. I stared at the screen. Ethan, the CFO who sweat through his shirts whenever the quarterly numbers were due. Ethan, who had watched Grant erase my name from every project and said nothing because he wanted to keep his bonus. I answered. "You are up late, Ethan." "Madeline," he whispered. The connection was clear, but his voice was shaking. "I heard rumors. Are you talking to Adrian Vale?" "I am talking to a lot of people, Ethan," I said, leaning against the velvet wall. "It is amazing how popular I have become in the last 24 hours. Listen to me," he said, his words tumbling over each other. "I did not want to sign those valuation reports. Grant made me. He said it was just a temporary bridge until the sterling money came through. He said he had your approval. And you believed him?" I asked. "Or was it just easier to believe him than to do your job?" "I have a family. Madeline," he pleaded. "I cannot go to prison. If you are coming back, if you are taking the chair, I can help you. I know where the rest of the bodies are. I can give you the unredacted ledgers for the Cayman accounts." I paused. I pulled up my secure server on my phone and ran a quick query on Ethan's digital signature log. There it was. He had authorized 3 separate transfers to the shell company in the last 6 months. He wasn't just a victim. He was an accomplice. But an accomplice who turns state's witness is a valuable weapon. "I do not need your help to find the bodies, Ethan," I said coldly. "I dug the graveyard. But if you want to stay out of a federal indictment, you will bring the physical hard drives from your safe to the board meeting tomorrow, and you will testify that Grant ordered the transfers." "I will," he stammered. "Does this mean I keep my job?" "It means you might keep your freedom," I said. "Do not push your luck." I hung up. One pawn secured. Then, a message notification lit up the screen. It was from Sloane Kerr, the woman who was currently sleeping with my husband. The woman who had smirked at me across the ballroom 7 days ago. "Sloane, watch your back. Grant is meeting with the crisis PR team right now. He is planning to announce tomorrow that you were the shadow operator behind the financial irregularities. He is going to say you were running a parallel set of books to defraud him." I stared at the text. Sloane wasn't warning me about sisterhood. She was warning me because she had realized Grant was a sinking ship, and she didn't want to drown with him. If Grant went down for fraud, he would drag everyone close to him into the investigation. Sloane was trying to cut the rope. I didn't trust her for a second, but I could use her. Madeline. Why tell me Sloane? Because I want a severance package, not a subpoena. He is drafting the press release now. He mentions your history of mental instability as the reason for the chaotic accounting. It was a confirmation of what Adrian had told me, but seeing it in writing from the inside made it real. Grant was going all in. He was going to destroy my sanity to save his reputation. I didn't reply to her. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an alliance. I simply took a screenshot of the message. It was proof that his inner circle knew he was fabricating a narrative. I put the phone away and walked back into the main lounge. Adrian Vale was standing by the fireplace, swirling a glass of amber liquid. He looked up as I approached. This was the first time we had spoken face to face since the call. He was taller than I remembered, with eyes that were unnervingly still. He didn't look like a corporate raider. He looked like a surgeon waiting for the anesthesia to take effect. You handled the committee well, Adrian said. They are sufficiently scared. Fear is a good motivator, I said. Grant is a problem, Adrian said, taking a sip of his drink. But you know why I really want him gone. It is not a fraud. Wall Street can forgive fraud if it is profitable. It is incompetence. He stole your work, Madeline, but he didn't even know how to steal it properly. He broke the machine because he didn't understand the gears. You knew, I said. All these years, you knew he was a fraud, and you let him stay. I let him stay because the stock was up, Adrian admitted without a hint of shame. I am not a moralist, Madeline. I am a capitalist. As long as the line went up, I didn't care who was actually driving the bus. But now the line is going down, and I hate losing money more than I hate bad management. So I am just a mechanic, I said. You are the salvage crew, Adrian corrected. Do not mistake my support for friendship. I will back you tomorrow because you are the only one who can stop the bleeding. But if you fail, I will fire you faster than I am firing him. I won't fail, I said. We will see, Adrian said. Grant is cornered. A cornered narcissist is dangerous. He will try to provoke you tomorrow. He will try to make you emotional. If you cry, if you scream, if you look like the crazy ex-wife for even 1 second, you lose. The board hates emotion. I am done with emotion, I said. But I needed to be sure. I needed to make sure Grant walked into that meeting arrogant, not defensive. An arrogant man makes mistakes. A defensive man is cautious. I needed to bait the trap. I stepped away from Adrian and pulled out my phone again. I opened my email app. I composed a message to Grant. Subject tomorrow. Grant. I heard about the board meeting. I am scared. I do not want a public fight. I do not want the police involved. I just want this to be over. Can we talk before the vote? Maybe we can find a way to settle this quietly. I am willing to take the blame for the accounting errors if you promise to protect me from the legal fallout. Please, Madeline. It was the perfect lie. It played into every delusion he had about me. He thought I was weak. He thought I was dependent. He thought I would set myself on fire to keep him warm. I hit send. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. My phone rang. It was Grant. I let it ring twice before answering. I pitched my voice to sound small, hesitant. Grant, I knew you would come to your senses, Grant said. His voice was rich with triumph. The panic I had heard in the recordings from earlier in the week was gone, replaced by his usual swagger. You are terrified, aren't you? You should be. The lawyers are talking about prison time. Madeline. I don't want to go to prison, I whispered. Then do exactly what I say, Grant commanded. Come to the meeting tomorrow. Admit that you were overwhelmed. Admit that you made mistakes with the numbers because you were stressed. If you do that, I will convince the board to let you resign quietly. I will give you a settlement. $5 million. You can disappear. $5 million. He was offering me pennies to take the fall for $100 million fraud. You would do that for me? I asked. I am a generous man. Grant said, I still care about you, despite everything. Just be a good girl. Madeline, come home. We will fix this. Okay, I said. I will be there. Good, Grant said. Wear something nice. You sounded shrill on the phone earlier. Try to look stable. He hung up. I lowered the phone. The small, scared expression vanished from my face, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He took the bait. He thought he had already won. He thought I was coming to surrender. He would walk into that boardroom tomorrow expecting a coronation, and instead, he was walking into an execution. I looked at Adrian, who was watching me with a raised eyebrow. He thinks I am surrendering, I said. Good, Adrian said. Let him sleep soundly. I left the club and drove back to the hotel. The city felt different tonight. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't afraid of the morning. I walked into my suite and went straight to the small safe in the closet. I spun the dial and opened the heavy door. Inside lay the velvet box containing the IP agreement, the ultimate weapon. Next to it sat a smaller box. My wedding ring. I had taken it off 3 days ago, but I hadn't looked at it since. It was a massive diamond, flawless and cold. Just like the man who gave it to me, I picked it up. It felt heavy, weighed down by a decade of lies. I didn't put it back on. I placed it gently into the box and snapped the lid shut with a final, sharp click. Goodbye, Grant, I said to the empty room. I walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline, the buildings standing tall and rigid against the dark sky. Tomorrow, I whispered, my reflection in the glass staring back at me with eyes that looked like steel. I do not ask for a seat. I take back my name. The boardroom of the Whitmore Lennox Group was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of glass and polished walnut, suspended 42 stories above the Chicago River. On Monday morning, the air inside was pressurized, heavy with the invisible weight of billions of dollars and the fragile egos of the men who controlled them. I arrived exactly 3 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. I did not enter through the side door. I walked through the main glass double doors, wearing the charcoal suit that felt like armor. I carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio and a small black flash drive in my pocket. Grant arrived 30 seconds later. He did not come alone. He was flanked by his crisis management team, a phalanx of 3 women and 2 men in sharp black suits, who stood just outside the glass wall like a Praetorian guard. Grant looked rested. He looked golden. He walked with the easy stride of a man who believes the script has already been written in his favor. He paused when he saw me sitting at the far end of the table. A flicker of pity crossed his face, a rehearsed expression, for the benefit of the 12 board members already seated. He nodded to me, a tragic, benevolent husband acknowledging his troubled wife. Madeline, he said softly, his voice carrying perfectly in the acoustic silence of the room. I am glad you felt up to coming. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply watched him take his seat at the head of the table. Sloane Kerr was to his right, her face pale, her eyes darting between Grant and me. Ethan Hale was on his left, staring intensely at the grain of the wood table as if looking for a trapdoor to escape through. Celia Rourke, the chairwoman, sat at the center. She tapped a silver pen against the table. The sound was sharp, like a gavel. "We are in session," Celia said. Her voice was dry and devoid of warmth. "The agenda today is singular: risk management and shareholder confidence. We have significant discrepancies in the quarterly projections and a freeze on our liquidity from the Sterling Trust. Grant, you have the floor." Grant stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at the board members, making eye contact with the ones he had taken golfing, the ones whose wives he had charmed. "Thank you. Celia," Grant began. His tone was grave, laced with a heavy sorrow. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. As you know, WLG has always prided itself on precision. However, recently, we have faced challenges that are personal in nature, but have unfortunately bled into the professional." He turned to look at me. It was a masterful performance. He looked like a man burdened by love and duty. "My wife," he said, gesturing to me with an open hand, "has been the heart of my life for 10 years. But as some of you may have read in the press, Madeline has been struggling with severe emotional instability for some time. In an effort to support her, I allowed her to maintain a consulting role on Project Gemini, hoping the work would ground her. It was a mistake made out of love, but a mistake nonetheless. He paused for effect. The board members shifted in their seats. They were uncomfortable, but they were buying it. It was the easy answer. Blame the hysterical woman. The accounting irregularities you are seeing, Grant continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, are the result of confused inputs from an unsupervised consultant who was not herself. I have a document here, signed by Madeline, in which she acknowledges her role in these errors and accepts liability. I am asking the board to accept her resignation, effective immediately, so she can get the help she needs. He slid the blue folder across the table toward Celia. The forgery. I am sorry, Madeline, Grant said, looking at me with sad eyes. It is for your own good. The room was silent. All eyes turned to me. They expected tears. They expected a scream. They expected the unstable woman Grant had painted. I stood up. I did not look at Grant. I looked at the stenographer sitting in the corner, her fingers hovering over her machine. Is the record capturing this? I asked clearly. The stenographer nodded. Good, I said. I turned to Celia. Madam Chairwoman, I request 7 minutes of your time. I do not have a speech about feelings. I have data. Grant chuckled, a condescending sound. Madeline, please, do not embarrass yourself further. 7 minutes, I repeated, locking eyes with Celia. If I am lying, you can call security and have me dragged out. But if I am right, you will want to hear this before you open that blue folder. Celia looked at Grant, then back at me. She saw the stillness in my hands. She saw the lack of fear. 7 minutes, Celia said. Proceed. I opened my portfolio. I took out 3 single sheets of paper and placed them in the center of the table. Exhibit A, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a laser. Mr. Whitmore claims I signed a liability waiver accepting blame for the financial fraud. He claims I signed it last Tuesday night. I pointed to the first sheet. This is a forensic log from the WLG server, I said. It shows that the digital signature on that document was created on an iPad located in the penthouse master bedroom at 3:15 in the morning on Tuesday. She signed it in bed, Grant interrupted, smiling dismissively. I was there. You were not, I said. I pointed to the second line on the paper. Because at exactly 3:15 in the morning on Tuesday, the biometric data from your smartwatch places your heart rate at 120 beats per minute in active state, and simultaneously, your unique user ID was logged into the corporate banking portal from a mobile device located in the living room, initiating a wire transfer. I looked at the board. Unless Mr. Whitmore has the ability to be in 2 rooms at once, watching me sign a document in the bedroom while simultaneously wiring money in the living room, the signature is a forgery. And if this board accepts a forged document to cover up corporate malfeasance, you are not just victims. You are co-conspirators in a felony. The air left the room. The board members stiffened. The word felony has a way of focusing the mind. Grant's smile faltered. This is technical nonsense. She hacked the logs. I am not finished, I said. Exhibit B. I slid the second paper forward. Mr. Whitmore claims the discrepancies in the books are calculation errors made by me. They are not errors. They are thefts. I pointed to the highlighted row on the spreadsheet. This is a transfer of $200,000 from the Tenant Security Deposit Trust, a restricted account. It was sent to an entity called GMW Holdings, LLC. I pulled the incorporation papers from the Cayman Registry yesterday. I looked directly at Grant. His face had gone the color of ash. The sole beneficiary of GMW Holdings is Grant Michael Whitmore. I said, he is not just cooking the books to look good for the bank. He is embezzling your capital to build a golden parachute. He is stealing from you. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the older board members took off his glasses and wiped them, staring at Grant with sudden hostility. Money was one thing, their money was another. Lies. Grant slammed his hand on the table. He stood up, his composure cracking. "She is fabricating this. I paid a vendor. This is slander." "Sit down, Grant," Celia said. Her voice was quiet, but it lashed like a whip. Grant froze. He looked at Celia, then at the other members. He saw the doubt taking root. He saw the walls closing in. "Exhibit C," I said. "The final nail." I held up the black flash drive. "For 10 years, you have believed that the proprietary algorithm driving this company, the Whitmore model, belonged to the firm. You believed it was an asset you owned." I placed the drive on the table. "You were wrong. The source code, the logic architecture, and the predictive engine were written by me, Madeline Pierce, 2 years before this company was incorporated in Illinois. Under the original founders' agreement, which I have right here, the intellectual property remains mine. I licensed it to WLG for $1 a year." I paused. I let the silence stretch until it was painful. "Grant has attempted to frame me for fraud using my own system," I said. "Therefore, under Clause 14B of the agreement, I am exercising my right to revoke the license immediately." "What does that mean?" a board member asked, his voice trembling. "It means," I said, "that as of 9 o'clock this morning, the software that runs your cash flow projections, your risk analysis, and your valuation reports is legally mine. If you use it, you are stealing. If you try to access the historical data generated by it, you are stealing. Without my permission, this company is flying blind in a storm." I turned to Grant. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like a man who had reached for a gun and found a snake in the holster. "You said I was bad for your image, Grant," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You said you could do better, but the truth is, you never built this company. You just stood in front of it while I poured the concrete, and now I am taking my concrete back." I looked at Sloan. "Sloan, did you know about the Cayman account?" Sloan looked at Grant, then at me. She saw the future. She saw the indictments. Sloan stammered. "I saw the transfer requests. Grant told me to ignore them. He said they were executive privileges." "You traitor!" Grant shouted, turning on her. "And Ethan?" I asked, looking at the CFO. Ethan Hale did not look up. He took a heavy file from his lap and slid it toward the center of the table. "These are the unredacted ledgers," Ethan whispered. "Grant ordered me to falsify the valuation reports. I have the emails." It was over. The king was naked, and his court had turned on him. Grant looked around the room. He saw the disgust on their faces. He saw the fear. He realized that the PR team outside could not spin this. This wasn't a scandal. It was an autopsy. "You cannot do this," Grant hissed, looking at me with pure hatred. "I am this company. The brand is me. If you take me down, the stock goes to zero." Celia Rourke stood up. She picked up the blue folder containing the forgery. She did not open it. She tore it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the silence. "We are moving to a vote," Celia said. Her voice was iron. "The motion is to suspend Grant Whitmore as CEO immediately, pending a criminal investigation, and to appoint Madeline Pierce as interim CEO with full executive authority to stabilize the firm." "Seconded," Adrian Vale said from the back of the room. "All in favor?" Celia asked. Every hand in the room went up, even the men Grant had golfed with, even the men who had laughed at his jokes about me. Rats know when to swim. Grant stared at the hands. He looked like he had been struck physically. "You cannot," Grant sputtered. His face was red, his eyes wild. He pointed a shaking finger at Celia. "You cannot do this to me. I built this. I am the CEO." He turned to me. "Madeline, tell them. Tell them you are lying. You need me. You are nothing without me." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved, the man I had saved, the man who had tried to destroy me because he was too small to handle my shadow. "I do not need you, Grant," I said, "and they do not need you." "You can't," Grant screamed, lurching forward. I did not flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. "I can," I said, and I just did. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot, ringing in the ears and making the air feel thin. Celia Rourke had called for the vote, and for a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then, Adrian Vale raised his hand. It was a slow, deliberate motion. He did not look at Grant. He looked at the ceiling, as if bored by the inevitability of it all. Then the man from the pension fund raised his hand, then the woman from the audit committee. Grant stood at the head of the table, his eyes darting from face to face. He was counting. I watched his lips move slightly. 1, 2, 3, 4. When the count reached 7, a majority, Grant stopped breathing. The color drained from his face so completely that his tan looked like a layer of dried paint on a crumbling wall. He had lost. He had lost before Celia even tallied the final count. He had walked into this room believing he was the emperor, and in the span of 20 minutes, he had been stripped naked. "The motion carries," Celia said. Her voice was devoid of sympathy. "Unanimously." "No," Grant whispered. It was a small, broken sound. "You cannot do this. The market will panic. You need a face." "We have a face," Adrian Vale said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished walnut table. "And we have had the brain for a long time. You see, Grant, you made a mistake. You thought we were blind." Adrian reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. It was battered. The spine was cracked. It was my old operations manual from Minneapolis, the one I had handwritten 10 years ago when we were building the company from nothing. I thought it had been lost in the move to Chicago. "I have had a copy of this for a week," Adrian said, tapping the cover. "While you were busy trying to hide your embezzlement in the Cayman Islands, the board has been running a simulation. We compared your strategic decisions over the last 5 years against the protocols outlined in Madeline's original architecture." Grant stared at the book, as if it were a holy relic that burned to the touch. "Every time you followed her rules," Adrian continued, his voice cold and precise, "the company made money. Every time you deviated to feed your ego, we lost capital. We did not just vote today based on a forgery. Grant, we voted because for the last 7 days, we realized we have been paying a premium for a CEO who is less competent than his own wife." Grant looked at the board members. They were not looking at him with anger anymore. They were looking at him with embarrassment. They were ashamed they had been fooled for so long. "This is a conspiracy," Grant spat, his voice rising. "She manipulated you. She is vindictive." "Grant, stop," Celia said. She closed the file in front of her. "It is over. As of this moment, you are suspended from all executive duties pending the results of a formal forensic investigation. Security has already disabled your access to the servers. The public relations team outside has been instructed to issue a statement regarding a leadership transition due to health reasons. We are giving you a graceful exit for the sake of the stock price, not for you. Health reasons." Grant laughed. A shrill, hysterical sound. "I am not sick." "You are toxic," Celia said, "and we are excising the tumor." Grant looked at me. His eyes were wide, frantic, searching for a weakness he could exploit. He fell back on the only weapon he had left, the weapon he had used to control me for years. "You," he sneered, pointing a shaking finger at me, "you think you can run this? Look at you. You are a back-office number cruncher. You are stiff. You are boring. You do not belong in this world. Madeline," he straightened his tie, trying to summon the ghost of his former arrogance. "You do not fit the image," he said. "You are bad for the brand. I told you that a week ago, and it is still true. You are an embarrassment to the elite. I deserve better. The company deserves better." The room went quiet again. The board members held their breath, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the unstable wife to appear. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the lapel of my charcoal suit. I did not raise my voice. I did not frown. I looked at him with the detachment of an auditor reviewing a bankrupt ledger. You are right about one thing. Grant, I said, I do not fit your image. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him, close enough to smell the fear sweating through his expensive cologne. But you are confused about the transaction, I said. You think the image makes the power. I know that the power makes the image. Your image needs me to survive, but I do not need your image. Grant opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I built the floor you are standing on, I said, and now I am pulling it out. I turned my back on him and looked at Celia. I accept the nomination for interim CEO, I said. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. However, I continued, raising my hand to stop the applause before it could start, I have conditions. If I'm going to clean up this mess, I am going to do it my way. Name them, Celia said. 1, I said. Total transparency. I want an independent audit of every transaction over $5,000 for the last 5 years. If we find more rot, we cut it out publicly. We do not hide it. Celia nodded. Agreed. 2, I said. Immediate termination of the smear campaign. The PR firm issues a retraction of the rumors regarding my mental health within the hour. If I see one more article quoting an anonymous source, I sue the board for defamation. Done, Adrian said. 3, I said. I want a signed board resolution, dated today, confirming that the forgery Grant presented is fraudulent and that I am fully indemnified against any legal action regarding the Project Gemini loans. We have it ready, Naomi Klein said. Stepping forward from the back of the room where she had been waiting silently, she placed a document on the table. Madam Chairwoman, if you would sign here. Celia signed it without hesitation. And finally, I said, looking back at Grant, I want him gone. Now. Celia looked at Grant. You heard the CEO. Please vacate the premises. Mr. Whitmore, security will escort you to collect your personal effects. 2 large security guards in dark suits stepped into the room. They did not touch Grant, but their presence was a physical wall pushing him toward the door. Grant looked around the room one last time. He realized there was no one left to charm, no one left to lie to. He was alone. He grabbed his leather briefcase with a shaking hand. He tried to muster some dignity, lifting his chin and turning toward the exit. He walked past me, his eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and shock. As he passed the threshold of the glass doors, his hand trembled. He fumbled with his grip, his gold-plated access card the symbol of his status. The key that opened every door in the building slipped from his fingers. It clattered loudly onto the marble floor. Grant froze. He looked down at the card. Then he looked at me. For a second, instinct took over. The instinct of 10 years of marriage. The instinct of the wife who picked up his socks, who found his keys, who fixed his mistakes. He expected me to move. He expected me to bow down one last time and help him. I stood perfectly still. I looked at the card on the floor, and then I looked into his eyes. You dropped something, I said. He waited. Pick it up yourself, I said. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. It was the final severance. The cord was cut. Grant turned a deep, violent shade of red. He glared at me, his jaw working. Then, slowly, painfully, he bent his knees. He crouched down in his Italian suit, looking small and broken, and scrabbled for the card on the floor. He stood up, clutching it like a lifeline, and walked out the door without looking back. The security guards followed him, and the glass doors slid shut, sealing him out of the world he thought he owned. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Naomi walked up to the head of the table. She placed 2 documents in front of the empty chair, Grant's chair, my chair. The acceptance letter for the CEO position, Naomi said, pointing to the document on the left. And the other, I asked, though I knew. The petition for dissolution of marriage, Naomi said, citing irreconcilable differences and felony fraud. I picked up the heavy fountain pen that Grant had left on the table. It felt cool and solid in my hand. I signed the CEO acceptance first, Madeline Pierce, then, without pausing, I moved to the divorce papers. I signed my name again, Madeline Pierce, 2 signatures, 2 doors closing, 1 massive gate opening. I handed the pen to Naomi. "Thank you," I said. I walked around the head of the table. The leather chair was high-backed and imposing. I sat down. It was comfortable. It fits. I looked out at the board members. They were watching me, waiting for orders. They looked relieved. They looked ready to work. I placed my hands on the table, palms flat against the wood. I felt the vibration of the building, the hum of the city 42 floors below. I was not the wife. I was not the victim. I was the architect, and I had just reclaimed my masterpiece. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And ladies," I opened the file Adrian had given me, my old operations manual. "We have a lot of work to do," I said. "Now, we start cleaning." Thank you so much for listening to the story of Madeline Pierce and her journey to reclaim her name. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country, so we can see how far Madeline's story has traveled. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please consider subscribing to the Violet Revenge Stories channel, hitting that like button, and smashing the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners. Your support means the world to us. Until next time.